Hello, it's Yuna. I'd like to continue on from my previous video that was the topic of discussion was generational curses and essentially their effects on the Black American mind. When I spoke about generational curses, I essentially said that these generational curses are nothing more than a buzzword or a fancy way to essentially acknowledge that there is a problem or an issue that is a hindrance on an individual's life, but they never really have to identify what that problem is as long as we put it under a blanketed statement or a blanketed phrase such as a generational curse. So I believe, as I said previously, that a generational curse is nothing more than an area that a person has a lack of discipline in. And that area could be financially, that area could be psychologically, that area could be emotionally. There's many different areas that we essentially will identify as being a problem by calling it a generational curse. But I feel like there is not a lot of conversations, or at least, in my circles, in my area, on the side of social media that I've been on, there just doesn't seem to be a lot of conversation about what to do about it. First and foremost, you have to address it. Right. And we've done that. And I think we basically a lot of people tend to trick themselves into thinking that, well, if I acknowledge it, then my job is done. And it's like, well, the first part, yes, you went further than most people, because I do feel there's a lot of people who won't even acknowledge that there is a problem because they like to, pretend it's not there. But then you do go a step further by acknowledging that there is a problem. But you have to begin to make some sort of plan and some sort of momentum to actually fix said problem. So, for instance, typically we will say things like, okay, there's a lot of discussion here, and that's why I really need people to be honest with themselves. And at least for the moment, take race out of it, because we do not want to use any sort of scapegoat or excuse as to why we are not improving as individuals and as why we are not improving as a community. So take race out of it for a second. Let's pretend that, there is no racism. Let's pretend that slavery didn't happen. And if you say, well, that's impossible, then okay, then you're not going to be able to do this exercise. This is all about perspective, right? This is all about perspective and what comes with that. So depending on your perspective dictates your emotions. Your perspective dictates your decision making. So if we take race out of it for a second, I want you to sit back and ask yourself, if my brown skin, me being a Black American, is not an issue in this hypothetical world, why am I in the situation that I am in currently? That could be positive or that could be negative, but I'm leaning more towards the negative side. If you're like myself, to where currently my family, we are struggling financially, we are struggling emotionally, we are struggling with our morale, trying to keep our morale high. Between, my wife and I, we are having a very difficult time. Our marriage is being tested. OK, and we have our 4 children that are mixed up in the middle of this, and we are doing our best essentially to navigate territories that we are unfamiliar with while trying to keep our household firm and also trying not to disrupt or hinder the growth of our children. We are essentially having to balance previous traumas and indoctrination and things that we were taught and exposed to while trying to raise our children to not be exposed to or make the same mistakes or make the same bad decisions. And I believe those are two different things. A mistake and a decision and a bad decision are two different things. And we like to mix those together. And as an example, to say, Oh, well, I made a mistake. Well, a mistake, you made a mistake one time. A mistake is when you do something or you say something, but we'll just say you do something and you don't really know what the consequences will be from that decision that you have made, whether good or bad. But if you make that decision and it ends up bad, right? Maybe you try to approach it a different way and it ends up bad again. Well, at a certain point, after one or two times, if we're now moving on to time 3, time 4, time 5, it is no longer a mistake. It is a conscious decision that you are making. There is a big difference between a mistake and a decision and a bad decision. OK, so we're having to navigate quite a bit due to our upbringing. Our upbringings, while not perfect, while not completely terrible, they were not what they should have been to prepare us for life. Now, when I bring the race thing into it, for me personally, I never had a person that was white. And I say white because that's typically always the conversation. It's white people above every other race. It's every other race, but it's usually white people at the very top of that. There was never a white person that came into my life and pretty much told me what I could or could not do as a black person. No one was gatekeeping to my knowledge, right? And you can say, well, maybe you just did. That's always the thing. It's always this idea of, well, you just didn't realize what was happening. You were ignorant. And that's very true. That is a very real possibility. OK, that is true. That is a fact. But at what point do we continue to be exposed to the same things and witness the same things and continue to make the same decisions and it not occur to us that, something is off here. Something is not adding up. Right. But I cannot say that there was a single white person or any other race that came into my life and said, hey, Una, do this thing that led me to ruin or to a bad decision. I can, however, remember things that I was exposed to, remember things that were done to me by other people who look like me, other brown skinned people. That is friends, that is families, that is people that lived, that lived in the same neighborhoods as me, that did actually do things to me that hindered my growth, that hindered me excelling and being the person that I was meant to be, that I still am meant to be. That's a real thing. So in this community, right, there were no talks about financial literacy. There were no talks about basically what you need to look for when it comes to a partner in life, a husband or a wife. It was a thing of, OK, people get married, right? There are people in my family who did get married, but there is not a lot. There, you can count on one hand the amount of individuals, man or woman, that got married in my family. My parent was not married. My wife's parents were not married. And we were essentially raised by our mom. So a situation of single moms. So we did not see our moms all the time in a, committed relationship. Now, her mom did go on to get married to someone later on. And my wife was there, to witness that. But there was nothing for us to pretty much go off of. So for me, I had to fill in the gaps with what I felt was appropriate when it came to surviving and trying to be a good person. So there was no consistent male figure in my life that would be able to provide me with guidance. I didn't know how to seek it out. I didn't know what I was looking for. But what I did know was I was able to identify individuals and males in particular that did not add value to my life. OK, and this is based on their conversations, based on their talks, things that we did not talk about, things we didn't cover. Oh, we'll talk about, ass. We'll talk about sex. We'll talk about, as they refer to them, bitches. We'll talk about, get your money up. We'll talk stuff like that. Right. But we're not talking about these core values that need to be instilled in us when we're younger and as we're developing. Now, you have people that have good intentions. But again, if there are no leaders, if there is no head of household, if there is not someone who has their head on straight and understands that through all the BS, you need to be instilling into the youth and your children the foundation of being responsible individuals who can contribute to society, you have absolute ruin, chaos, and destruction. So and this is where people really don't have sympathy for you. You find out that a lot of people really don't care about you. They don't care about what you've been through. All they care about is the person they have in front of them. And if there's something that you say or do that they don't like, they will cast you to the side. It does not matter. I don't care about the trauma that you went through that basically made you the person that you are. Now, within reason, if you have an individual who's, all about, like just murderous, like pushing drugs and sleeping with a bunch of women, and you got the women who are kind of on the same time, they indulge in those type of activities and with those type of men, then there's a line. I get not necessarily wanting to give them the time of day. Now we should, but it's a conversation for a different time. But when you have an individual that basically shows you that they are trying to do well in life, they're staying out of trouble, they're staying out of the streets, they're not messing with drugs, they're not messing with, hoes, and hoes, it can be men and it can be women. They're not messing with hoes, they're not messing with degenerates and people who have no value system. There's something there to work with. And those are the individuals that I want to work with. And I'm that individual that I wish someone would have worked with me. So it all goes back to self-accountability and not wanting to be a victim. I can look back on my life and say, dang, man, I wish that I would have done that differently. I wish that I could have done this. I can see opportunities that were staring me in the face that I wasn't able to identify because you're consistently in survival mode. As a community, and this is not everybody, please spare me the whole, I'm not painting everybody with a broad brush. How many times does that distinction need to be made? If it does not apply to you, then it does not apply to you. But it applies to the individuals that it applies to, right? So how many times have we basically had, conversations about real things that did not have anything to do with race? I have heard this race, and it's not, I'm going to be honest, I feel that it's nonsense. I'm not saying that racism isn't real. It's very real, okay? There's no way that you can have billions of people on this earth and there not be someone who has an issue with the color of your skin. People are stupid. People are stupid, okay, when it comes to stuff like that. But the people who hate you because of your race, right, they are stupid. But I also feel that it is very stupid to think that people care so much about your race that they're willing to go out of their way to hinder your life individually. We can get into a conversation about, systemic racism, or, it's deeply ingrained. It's deep, it's all around. Like, that's great. But the fact of the matter is, when it comes down to it, at this point in time, who is in control of your life and who has been in control of your life? I can say that a lot of my frustration and anger, depression, rage, all those things are because I realize that I have never been in control of my life. My life has been dictated by the individuals around me. And you can say, well, why didn't you at some point just stop letting it happen? Why didn't you? It's not that simple. It's not that simple. Think about yourself in a situation that you're in, right? Some trauma that you've experienced. Is it as simple for you to tell your brain to stop feeling that way, to stop thinking that way? It's not. It's very difficult. I cannot sit here and honestly say that my life has been hindered by the white man, any other race. I cannot sit here and say that the current state that my life is in and the reason that my family is struggling is because of a race or a single man or a single woman that was white. I can't say that. Or even a policy. Because there are certain things that basically I realize in hindsight that I had the opportunity to grab that opportunity and move forward with it. But due to being indoctrinated with someone else's fears and insecurities around being something different than what we are raised in, that suppressed my ability to be able to be bigger than my environment. I always wanted to be, right? I stayed out of the streets. I stayed away from drugs. I stayed away from hoes. I stayed away from dudes that just wasn't about life. And I had a dream a dream to basically work, in a specific industry, something different than being a ball player or a rapper or, working. And there's nothing wrong with working at the corner store, but it's like there's more to life. And it's like we refuse to acknowledge that the people who are hindering us and that are keeping us from going further in life is the very people that we grew up around. And if you want to argue that, well, stop passing the buck. Stop passing the buck and the blame and shifting the blame and moving the goalposts every time we try to identify what the issue is. There are certain things that I didn't learn because of the decisions that my parents made. My parents separated when I was younger. And I say separated again, they were not married, but the relationship didn't work. So me and my siblings, we went to live with my mom, not my dad. Right. So there's certain things that my mom did not have for whatever reason, whether she wasn't taught it, whether she was too busy. Right. Because I remember my mom worked all the time. She worked all the time to put food on the table. Well, when you're working all the time to put food on the table, how do you have time to do anything else? And that comes from not a white man coming in and saying, hey, you need to go and live your life this way. That comes from no one preparing, whether it was her parents, friends, family, preparing her saying, hey, you need to stop surviving and you need to start living. And what I mean by that is if you do not want to work for the rest of your life doing laborious work, if you want to be able to call it quits when you're ready, if you want to be able to set your children up for success, you need to do certain things that allow you to plant the seed for them to flourish and for yourself to flourish. And that is investing, whether it's in the stock market, whether it's in a bond, whatever it may be. There's no talks of investing. It's all consuming. It's working until you die, consuming things that give you temporary dopamine hits, meaning wasting and spending your money on things that you don't need, things that you want, when you could have taken that money and put it into something that would grow for yourself and your children and generations after. Now, whose fault is that? Whose fault is that? I can sit there and I can blame my mom. I can blame my uncle. I can blame a cousin. I can blame my environment. And all those things definitely do play a part. But the bottom line is, at what point do we take responsibility for ourselves? I could sit here and be like, damn, my mom didn't teach me this, or she didn't put me around individuals I could keep saying that for the next 10, 20, 30 years of the rest of my life. Or I can acknowledge that that is the case. And I can begin to figure out how to correct and fix it. That's the option. And the difficult thing is, once you're deep in it and you realize how deep in it you are, that is incredibly difficult to deal with. And that's where my household is currently. We understand and realize that these traumas are so much more deeper and so much more effective than what we ever could have possibly imagined. But that's because this type of pressure has never been put on us. You could if you're not married, if you have no ties to each other, you typically can just walk away, right? But we have a responsibility to each other. We have a responsibility to our children. So walking away is not an option. So we have to fix it. It hurts. It's difficult. It's tough. But say 10 years from now, if we don't turn the situation around and our kids are, in their late teens, right? Our kids are in their late teens. They're older and they're asking us, mom, dad, and they're going to have a completely different perspective because they don't have the same experiences that we have. But from a person looking from the outside, and they're going to say, mom, dad, how come you didn't just, lock in and just really work hard to turn the situation around? What kept you from basically figuring this thing out, doing what needed to be done, and helping to change the trajectory of not only yourselves, but us, your children? Do you really think I'm going to sit there and look my kids in the face and say, well, you know what, son, it was racism? Well, you know what, young lady, it was racism. Yeah, well, because my mom didn't. Well, because my cousin, that one time, all those things are factual, But the bottom line is, at what point do we take accountability for ourselves? Think about the trauma that you have been through. If you were to go and ask your parent or some other adult that had an influence over your lives, and you said to them, why did you allow that to happen to me? Or not that you're blaming them for, but how come you put me in a situation where that was a possibility? Would you accept from them that, well, because racism, well, because, my dad, because I did, would you accept that? Would that not make you angry and upset? So I can't imagine me sitting there and telling my kids, well, you know what, sons, you know what, daughters, because I was so fearful, because I couldn't shake those chains. And there are situations where you can't. And that's awful. I'm not giving up on our situation. But there are times when it's like, man, it would be so much easier if you just gave in. Or like everyone does, it would be so much easier if I put the blame off on somebody else, such as a white person. This idea, which it's a phantom of an idea because it's ever changing. I don't ever have to hold myself accountable if I have an outside source that I can put all the blame onto. I'm not successful in life because of white people. I'm not successful in life because of slavery. Okay, so we are so far removed from slavery, right? We are so free and we have no idea because we are psychologically shackled. Yes, someone put this into motion years ago, and it still affects us to this day. But you mean to tell me that slavery, someone putting this into motion, the fact that someone doesn't like your brown skin is an excuse for you not to put your best foot forward in everything that it is you do in life? Is that what you're telling me? Because of racism, I look at another black man as my enemy, as my op. Because of racism, I lay down with and let degenerate men put babies in me. Because of racism, because of slavery, I don't handle my finances. Because of racism, because of slavery, I don't take care of myself as an individual. That is a lame ass excuse, and I am tired of hearing it. It ruins lives. Take it from me. It ruins lives. And you know how they say that we have to, as black people, we have to work 10 times harder than any other race on this earth. We're such the main character and everything. We got to work 1,000,000 times harder than anyone else. You know why that is? It's not because we're black. That's how it used to be back in the day, before our time. It's because we have to wade through all the nonsense and BS that we like to dress up and call generational curses, which again is a lack of discipline. We have to fight through all the nonsense that we're constantly inundated with since we're children. About how we're not good enough, about how we're never going to be accepted, about how the police hunt us, about how we're hated all over this earth. We have to basically wade through that nonsense and play this game of, am I black enough? Do I care enough? I shouldn't do anything because, well, the world hates me, so there's no point in me putting effort in anything. We have to wade through all of that nonsense before we can even figure out who we are. And most of the time, a lot of us don't even get a chance to do that until we're almost goddamn 40 years old. Imagine someone who is 50, 60, 70 years old and they realize, oh my God, this whole time I could have taken my life into my own hands. But because somebody had this insecurity or this bullshit ass viewpoint about how everything is against it. How can everything be against you and you believe in God at the same time? I'll never understand that. Christ is king. God is, God Almighty, God Almighty, God Almighty. But yet the world hate. But you worried about the world hating you? I thought when Christ is on your side, when God is on your side, no weapon can prosper. No weapon formed against you can prosper. I'm not really understanding. We are going to have difficult times in life. It's life. But you are making it 10 times harder by telling these children and these people that when they leave out of their front door, the world hates them. If the world hates me, why the hell would I put any effort into doing anything in life? I am always going to be in survival mode. I am always going to be surviving. And when I'm surviving, I am constantly under duress. I am angry. I am depressed. I am suicidal. I am homicidal. When are we going to take responsibility for ourselves? Knock it off with the excuses. I'm tired of hearing about what white people do. I don't have any beef with white people personally. I don't have beef with the police personally. I'm tired of moving the buck, placing the blame on something else. We got to stop killing each other, y'all. Well, white people kill. I wasn't saying anything about white people. Obviously, white people kill each other. That's not what I'm talking about. We got to do better in this education. Well, white kids, when it comes to, their GPAs, and I'm not talking about white, always with the excuses. I'm tired of the excuses, and I'm tired of no progress. I had to get that off my chest. More to come. I hope you'll stick around. If you agree or disagree, please let me know in the comments. I hope you like the video. I hope you subscribe, and I hope you stick around. My videos are for everyone. I'm a very upset Black American. That does not mean that I hate Black people. That does not mean that white people are better. That does not mean anything. That means that I'm tired of us playing around and not doing what needs to be done. Going from Black Wall Street and a really affluent community that had its own wealth and money. And if you want to talk about, racism broke that apart. OK, that's great. But again, how did we go from that to what we have today, which is just a community that has a lot of degenerates and degeneracy in it? Not everybody, but you know who I'm talking about. Let's not play that game. How did we go from this? How did we go from that to what we have today? And how do we get back to that? Not only how do we get back to that, how do we go further than that? There is no person, white, Asian, Indian, whatever, holding a gun to your head and saying, hey, be a degenerate. Hey, put your dick in that woman and don't pull out. Hey, go ahead and have a 6th kid. You already can't afford it. Just get on government. Nobody's doing that. What did that is what we were taught and what was passed on to us, a la generational curses. Thank you for listening. I'll talk to you soon.